Well, here we are, all set for yet another day of cricket. It's a new week. We're looking forward to Kolkata taking on Rajasthan. It's not a double header, it's a single header. Things have settled down a little bit after everything that happened over the weekend. Lots of changes up and down the table. We'll have a look at that later. For now, let's just build up to this particular one because it's crucial, particularly for Kolkata, to try and win everything from here and then just hope that the number of points, the maximum points they can put on board, would possibly be all right for a top four place. I'm joined by Pommie Mbangwa and Joy Bhattacharjya. Gentlemen, pink playing purple, and the big talking point is going to be, are Kolkata going to make more changes? We'll find out soon, but it's probably been their undoing this season.
Hi. And which one are you, pink or purple?
I'm both. That's why I'm trying to be neutral today. The pink collar and the purple waistcoat. It's not called sitting on the fence. It's just called supporting both teams.
Well, that is the definition of sitting on the fence.
All right, Pommie, maybe you can kick us off here. I mean, it's we will see the changes from both teams very, very shortly. But whatever happens, whether even if Kolkata go with an unchanged team, the fact that they've made it from game one till now, you should have had your settled 11 by now, your first 11.
Yeah, I think it would be nice for a team to be settled on who their 11 is, and if and when they change, the changes being tactical rather than a case of a search for form or a search for balance. And that's what's happened with the Kolkata Knight Riders. You know, every game it's a case of, okay, so we're going with these guys because we think they're the best guys to play now. And then what happens is Cummins turns up. They think, right, he's our big gun, so he's got to come into the side. He comes into the side, and then he doesn't go so well. You know, a couple of games go okay, and then, maybe not so good. And then they think, well, do we change? Do we not? But because he's one of your big guns, you hang with him for some time, a couple of games more, nothing changes, and you're not necessarily winning games. So it's a problem. You've got to make a change somehow. And they finally got there and made the change. And they went back to Saudi. Saudi's good bowler. And he didn't do anything before. When he played first time, he did well. And then he comes back and he does well again. So generally he's gone okay. But there might still be the, do we, don't we, who do we go with? And it's not just the overseas pros they're having an issue with. They're having an issue pretty much all over the place and are still at this very stage kind of struggling with who the main people are in the side in terms of kind of keeping them as a constant.
Well, let's not keep the suspense any longer. Before I come to Joy, let me update you on the toss. Kolkata have won the toss. They've won something so far, and they have decided to field first. No change there. We were wondering, even without changes, it'll still be a lot. They have made two. So, Joy, as I bring you into the conversation, let's get into that with adding two more names to the changes list.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe Anukul Roy is making his debut, and then Shivam Mavi is coming back. And the whole problem with it is, look, it's a very scattergun approach that you keep firing something at a target and hope that something sticks. And last year it actually worked for them because, finally, you just look at this, first Saudi comes in, first changes Saudi for Mavi, then Shivam Mavi out, Sheldon Jackson in, then Cummins and Rasik Salan comes in, Saudi Mavi go out. One match they didn't make a change because Pat Cummins played a spectacular innings, and then again you look at it, they're trying to solve their opening batting problems. When they solve their opening batting problems by trying to put in Finch, they have to pay the Indian keeper. The moment they play the Indian keeper and he's not doing well, they're trying to replace him. Rasik Salam is an unfortunate thing, goes out due to injury. Shivam Mavi is in and out, and I don't really know, is he their designated gun all-rounder? They spent 2 years on him. So that's the problem. Who's your designated fast bowler? Who's your enforcer fast bowler in the first few overs? Who is your designated wicket keeper? These are vital things. Who's opening for you? And all these three are really vital cogs of a team. And look, last year it worked for them. They were in a very similar situation where Venkatesh Iyer just came out of nowhere and scored 370 runs. But it doesn't happen every year. Basically, what you're trying to do is throw it. Somebody gets successful. Okay, just hold on to him for a while. But that doesn't happen. A guy doesn't come in every year and suddenly give you something out of nowhere. So you have to know at least what is your 11. And one of the reasons why I think this is more upsetting is there are teams who are forced to do this because there's a lot of injuries out there. And in Kolkata, except for the fact that, okay, maybe Cummings was not there for the first couple of matches, I think Finch had a niggle for one match. But the rest of the changes are there doing. And that's, I just find that really, really difficult for the team to settle down if they keep doing that.
And to add to that, we saw that entire list, Pommie. The one pattern in the list which will also not be very, or it will be troubling for them, is that two of the retained players are in the exit button list in the last two games. Varun Chakravarti, previous game, today Venkatesh Iyer.
Yeah, excuse me. I think it's a case very much. I mean, with Chakravarti, it's a case of form, right? That happens, and Chakravarti's been a wonderful bowler for them, and he's not quite done what they expected. He's not quite gone as well as they expected. He had been a banker at the back end of the innings, middle and back end of the innings, and they used to kind of control games using him and also Sunil Narayan. And it's not quite worked out that way. And what happens is people kind of work out what you do, and they figure out, because they can plan for you, how they're going to play you. And so you've got to step up. In the case of Venkatesh Iyer, I can't say that it's entirely his fault. If you don't know where you're going to be, if you're not playing in the position that best suits you, and you're trying continually sort of adjust and play different roles within the side, then it's going to be difficult. He succeeded. Where did he succeed? He succeeded at the top of the order. And so in keeping him, you'd think that the story would be in their minds, in their camp, that there is a spot that's sorted out. So with that spot sorted out, there are other things to sort out. But if you then shift him from there, then you're creating another problem. And it's going to be a difficult one to solve if what you do doesn't work the first time. And it hasn't worked for Kolkata. So, yeah, it's a problem for them.
Yeah, Venkatesh Iyer definitely was a case of performing just way out of his skin in the previous season. And it was almost a knee-jerk reaction to say this, and he's so precious, let's hang on to him. I mean, I don't know, just my opinion, he's the kind of person you probably could have allowed to go and then brought him back quietly. With all due respect to him, I'm not sure he's the kind of person everyone's going to go berserk over. But the other player, Joy, to get your opinion, Varun Chakravarti. Yes, it's about lack of form, but again, lack of form for a retained player.
Yeah, lack of form for a retained player. And I just wonder what's happening is that they've figured out that Kolkata, they can't play to. Sunil Narayan is actually bowling much better than he's even bowling the last few years. So Sunil Narayan is really one of the guys who's up. Now, what's happening is, therefore, they feel, opposing batsmen feel, they have to take more chances with Chakravarti. So they're going after him a bit. And once they've started to go after him, they've seen results. And he's also somehow not managed to sort of, get those wickets or get those breakthroughs or have them stumped way outside their crease. So he's not managed to capitalize on their risk-taking. That's basically what's happened. And once that happens, you're in a situation where your confidence starts going. You start getting pumped for 20, 25, 30, first two over spell, and then every other team and batsman is looking at you and wondering, okay, this guy just looks as if this is yes here, isn't this here? And around the tournament, teams are very quick to pick up with stuff like that. Okay, this guy is not in form. So I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I don't think he's bowling very differently. I think he's bowling more poorer balls, more hittable balls this year than he ever has. But that's one of the things that happens all the time.
Yeah, so it's also the other thing that connects these two players, and they're not alone there, is they also found their way, thanks to their performances with this franchise, into the national side. So it's sort of climbing up within the franchise, being retained, playing for India, and whoops, not even in the franchise 11, Pommie.
Yeah, and I suppose also in just talking about where players perform optimally, what's their best position and all of that, it doesn't help things when, as a Venkatesh Iyer, you turn up into the national side, but the top two positions are taken, right? The top two positions are taken and you're not going to bat there. So you end up in the middle order. And then when you come back to what is your franchise, you turn up there and they think, oh, do you know what? Seeing as that was done that way, we too can do it this way, and we'll use him as a middle order player rather than as an opener right up at the top so he can go about his work. So yeah, I think it ends up being this voyage of discovery for the player, and a situation where he's trying to continually adjust when, in terms of reference points, what he has is a totally different scenario. So he can't apply those same reference points to the second season, because the role is entirely different. If he was struggling up at the top, he could at least go back to, this is what I did back then, batting up at the top here, and so this is what I need to get back to. Right now, it's kind of all new stuff, and so you can understand the difficulty for the player. And in the end, as I said before, I don't think it's his doing. Yes, it's your job to be in form and to score runs and to do the job for the side, but it's not necessarily all his doing that he's struggling in the positions that he's been asked to fulfill.
Well, that's as far as Kolkata are concerned. This is a discussion, I'm sure, that will spill on to further days, more shows. But for now, to look at the opposition from purple to pink, it's not been a great time for them winning tosses, but they wouldn't care. If of all the 10 teams, if there was one team who wouldn't mind losing every toss because they probably prefer to do the less preferred option, but just not want to ask to do it, that is Rajasthan. So they're happy, lose toss, bat first, put runs on the board, win most matches. But what they have done is, Joy, interestingly, they've made the one change we thought they would make. We were saying Daryl Mitchell, he's the one, we're not sure if he fits into the side, but this is not the player we thought who would replace him, Joy. We thought another overseas comes in, we gave you all the choices. Back comes Karun Nair.
Yeah, very interesting. I was seeing an interview recently of Trent Bolt, and he was saying that of all the people who played him in the nets, Karun Nair was playing him the best. So obviously he's had some really impressive net sessions recently. And I think what's also happening is, I think there's a situation now where they're looking at it and saying that this tracks are going to spin a little bit more. And I think tracks are going to turn a little bit more. And somebody who's more used to playing spin, somebody who's more used to batting in these conditions, let's get him in early. Let's give him 2-3 matches to settle down, because we plan to make a long run in this tournament. So I think Karun Nair, if they bring him in, and I think Sangakkara, it's a very thought through decision, they'll probably say, we're going to give him 3-4 matches and see if he can play that spot, because you know what? If I get into this tournament, this ball is going to be turning square and it's going to be coming at knee height. So it's about time we get somebody in there who can play in these conditions. So I think it's a long-term decision, and it'll be interesting to see how it turns out.
Yeah, Pommie, I guess horses for courses. We always raise our eyebrows when a team doesn't go for all their 4 overseas players. If it ends up being 2, we raise both eyebrows. But when it's 3 and you see there's a reason for doing it, you probably say, okay, fine, Karun Nair, some solidity. Maybe they want a solid number 4 rather than going for a Nisham.
Yeah, I think in sort of looking at what you have within your camp, number one is that gone are the days in the Indian Premier League where, you know, the people who can fulfill the roles that are open, those 4 spots for overseas professionals or overseas players, you know, it's not necessarily that the quality of the international is going to be better than the quality of the local player. Sometimes it's the other way around. In this case, as you say, you know, horses for courses. And if we go according to what Joy just said with regard to the pitches and the way they'll play in this latter half of the tournament, slower, rather more difficult in terms of trying to accumulate runs, not so easy for you to nudge here and there. And you want a scenario where guys are able to do that, because in general, their side has a Butler and a Samson and a Padikkal who are going at one end. And when whoever it is comes in, they've got to be adept at working the ball around or at getting started pretty much straight away. And if they're foreign players, that's going to be that little bit more difficult. We've seen it with Mitchell. It's been tough, a couple of innings that he's played where it's more boundaries that he's searching for and doesn't necessarily find them. And so kind of struggles a little bit because of those conditions. So instead of going to overseas again, go to local, because he'll understand the conditions better. And when they dropped him, they did say, Samson said at the end of that game when Mitchell came in, he said, you know, a guy hasn't had a go and we've changed him, because we think this is the better way to go, and they're looking for an over here and an over there. Karnaya bowls some, doesn't he? Doesn't he bowl his leggies? And perhaps they'll be useful somewhere down the line, and he could use it.
Yeah, but also I think if we just finish off on this discussion, Joy, they probably didn't need the extra bowling of Mitchell. I know they tried him for the 1 over, it didn't work, but that's probably not the reason they'd drop him. They said, well, we don't necessarily need that extra. We've got 5 solid bowlers. Riyan Parag has not been utilized enough, so we can utilize him if we need him. So I think they don't have problems as such. So they've just decided to go for solidity as far as the 11 is concerned. But Kolkata, we may have shown you the table with all the changes throughout the season. But what is the net result of that? What does today's 11 actually look like, Joy? Harshit Rana came in for 1 game. He goes out. In comes Shivam Mavi. Anukul Roy is now the replacement in there. So Rinku Singh retains his place. So now, and of course, Anukul Roy comes in for Venkatesh Iyer. So now there's a little bit of rejigging to be done again, which probably means Sunil Narayan definitely opens the batting.
Yeah, I'm just looking down that list and seeing who else could open the batting. And unless, and even Rinku Singh doesn't open at the state level, so unless they throw in somebody like Baba Indrajit or Rinku Singh out there, I think you're in a situation where definitely it's a situation where Sunil Narayan opens. And here's the point: if Sunil Narayan opens to the likes of Trent Bolt, I mean, they know where Prasidh Krishna, they know where to bowl to him. They definitely know where to bowl to him. So I'm not saying that Sunil Narayan's a good player. He'll try and find a way through. But this is not going to be easy for him at all. I just do not understand what they're trying to do. And vis-a-vis, you're throwing in players. It's not as if these players are particularly, you have terrific players sitting out there in the bench who are just walking into this tournament and, destroy it in day one. I fail to, the discarded section of KKR usually is the sort of bargain section for next year. And a great example of that is, of course, Kuldeep Yadav, discards on the discard pile of Kolkata, and then suddenly he becomes the main guy. So I think that's the thing that's happening out here. I think we need a situation where they just need to stick for 4-5 matches. And it's not a question. See, the problem, again, I go back to this. Brendan McCullum is the kind of player whose heart throbs for his team. You tell him any position, anytime, he'll play it. If he can't play, he'll sit out and cheer just as much. The problem is every player is not Brendan McCullum. Every player doesn't think that way. Players are insecure. Players have contracts to think about. Brendan McCullum is a force of nature as a player, and he doesn't think about these matters like selection and where do I play and what happens in the next auction. But his players do, and I think that's what he's doing. He's behaving like all the players are like him, and I think while trying to do that, the players are unsettled by that because they are not Brendan McCullum. And this is a problem with a lot of really, really big coaches who are fantastic players in their time. They find it difficult to understand how the average player reacts.
There's an interesting theory there, Pommie, from Joy. And there's probably a huge element of truth in it because we've seen this happen with a few players. Sometimes it's someone who maybe hasn't been an enforcer himself. A good player, yes, but maybe not an enforcer like McCullum, who then identifies more easily with his mere mortals.
Yeah, look, I get that, and I don't disagree with it necessarily. I do think, though, that in the arranging of the pieces that they have, they've not necessarily arranged them correctly. And last season, when McCullum would sort of say to his players, be aggressive, play like him, we wouldn't be surprised. We sort of go, okay, so this is the McCullum way. Up at the front, they attack and they try and make sure that they get ahead of the game, but because their boundary count is high and they use that power play. And then if you can carry on, you carry on from there. If you can't, then you play accordingly as you go along. But the mindset has to be one of an attacking team. That's just the 2020 game. That's how it is. And when guys don't play well, that's also the nature of cricket. You can't necessarily play well all the time. However, I'll keep harping on about it, that you've got to have guys in the places where they would perform optimally, giving them the best chance to give the best of themselves. And if that is what you have in your arrangement of your pieces and it's failing, then that's fine. But the changes that are being made are changes where we think guys are going in places that don't necessarily suit them and then going to try and play this game that kind of goes with the ethos of what the team does. And then it's not quite working, so they change it. And Aaron Finch, for instance, is a Brendan McCullum-like player. He's not going to stand there and nudge balls yet. He is all out attack. And if it gets you 100, it'll be a 55 balls. Simple as that. That's how he's going to bat. And he's not going to change it. And Brendan McCullum's not going to tell him to change it. But you've got to take the rough with the smooth, right? So if he's your guy and he's your best at doing it, up he goes to the top of the order, he's your guy. If Venkatesh Iyer is the best support to that, let him go up to the top of the order and away they go. And through the season, you'd know that more often than not, these guys will give you a start. If they don't give you a start, you've got to accept that they won't, because it's high octane from them, and therefore repair it with those who come after that. But yeah, as I say, for me, it's just the jigsaw is not quite right. The pieces aren't arranged correctly.
Well, let's talk about the men in charge here. Not the coaches necessarily. Of course, they have a role to play, but the actual leaders out there on the field. Now, we've seen that throughout the tournament. There have been question marks. Over the weekend, we had the big talking point of a captaincy being handed over from one player to another or back to another. This time around, we're talking about two players, one of whom definitely a class player, new captain for the franchise. But Joy, if we do the comparison between these two, particularly if you have a look at how many of the runs have come in a winning cause, that's where Shreyas Iyer will want a few more from himself in those circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, this comparison looks flattering to Shreyas, and I mean, he's not done badly with the bat himself, but what he's failed to do, and perhaps they've been tough targets, he's not managed to get his team across the line that often. And I think that's one of the things. Strike rate of 130, you can't help it, because a couple of those were in rebuilding situations. But I think what really Sanju Samson has done very well this year is to come in when Joss Butler is in full flow and take over the responsibility for attacking while Joss Butler catches his breath a bit. And you see a lot of those innings, those 200 strike rates, 38 and 19 balls, 14, 20 odd balls, which he's done. And he's done it really well. And I think he's played very selflessly as a player. He's not thought about, why am I taking risks out here? He's coming in there and saying, I need to take risks because that's a set guy. Let him catch his breath. Let him hit the safe shots. Let him keep going. Let me take a few risks because there's a lot of batting left after me. It's the 15th over already. And I think, for whatever you say, Sanju has been accused of being profligate. He's the kind of guy who throws his wicket away in situations. I don't think this is the year that you can pin that on him, because most of the situations in which he's come into bat and thrown his bat around have been situations where the team needed him to throw the bat around. And therefore, it's 244 runs, but if I was Sangakkar, I'd look at Sanju and said, good job, just keep playing the way you are. Play the situation, do not play your captaincy, do not play the averages.
If you did a like-for-like comparison, Pommie, sometimes you can't just look at the numbers. You have to look at the respective players' role in the team, and as Joy said, the circumstances. For Sanju, it's been a Butler-led team, all the enforcing coming from there, and him just having to add to that. Shreyas, in a sense, with everything that's happening around him, probably needs to be the leader in more senses than one.
Yeah, I think to go to Shreyas, first of all, I think Joy touched on it. The fact that essentially what's happened is that there's been a need for a rebuild each time he's sort of gone to the crease, more often than not, because up at the top, there's not been a great deal of performances, if any at all, actually. So when he comes in, it's not so much a case of, right, let's move this forward. It's, can we get ourselves started? Can we get ourselves in the game? Can we keep ourselves in the game? And then he can go to work a bit later once things have sort of been stabilized. And in doing that job, it's going to be pretty difficult to have a strike rate of like 150 or something. So he's done a decent enough job. I agree with Joy to say whilst the job has been decent, when you look at those numbers in isolation, you say, oh, these are decent numbers. But then you've got to ask yourself the question, how many are you winning? Right? So would you take less runs and a couple more wins? And most players will say, yes, I'll take less runs and a couple more wins, definitely, because you want wins on the board. In looking at Samson, it's kind of the other way around. He walks in a side that up at the top of the order are going beautifully. This guy is having a pink patch, I suppose we could call it, rather than purple, and scoring heaps of runs in Jos Buttler. And teams can waste 100. And by that, I mean, someone goes up at the front, plays really well, gets 100, and then those around him, instead of enforce and kind of impose themselves on the situation, they can rest on the laurels of the fact that, you know, someone's got 100, we're already up at 190 and whatever. And instead of getting to 220, they get 200 and 201 and leave game. You might still win, but that can come back to bite you. I think it's important not to underestimate the importance of valuable cameos. And that's what Samson has done this season. Walk in, make sure there is no respite for the opposition. And so strike at 160, strike at 170 to just build on the work that's been done by Padikkal and Buttler. And so there's no comeback for your opposition. And he's done it brilliantly. I think it's fantastic. That strike rate is actually, I thought it wasn't as high as that, but it's actually brilliant the way he's gone about things.
Yeah, well, as and when Shreyas does play that leading role, he's going to realize more than anyone else, Brendan McCullum, the rest of the franchise, the ownership, the fans, everyone, that it's already got to that time when it's make or break, do or die, call it what you like, because they need to win every game from now on. We were counting down for Mumbai. When does it get to a stage when it's mathematically out? Well, it did happen at number 8. So now they're just playing for pride. For Kolkata, Joy, quick look at that. 6 points, 9 games. Remember, they had 6 points from 4 games, and they look really good. They're still stuck at 6 from 9. They now can get to a maximum of 16. Now, we know it's not impossible, but 16 is on the edge.
16 is on the edge. 16 is on the edge. That means they need some results to go their way to qualify with 16. 16, if you had 8 teams, is a sure shot qualifier. 16 with 10 teams, you could end up with 5 teams on 16 or more. It could be, it just, the one big thing Kolkata will have to hope for is one, that they keep winning all 5, and that basically Chennai and Mumbai continue to take down teams. They just really need Chennai and Mumbai to claw down some wins and get those guys down, because that's basically the only way that they'll miss qualifying if they win all 5, is if the others also keep beating Chennai and Mumbai, and they just, teams end up with 2 teams end up with 9, 2 teams end up with 8, 3 teams end up with 8, and they lose in run rate. So I think those are the situations that they'll be looking at. Look, the good thing is that actually this suits Brendan's temperament. This is the do or die, and if you look at the team now, it's a very young team. I mean, it's a fairly inexperienced team. Look at that order. In those players, you have Anukul Roy, who's going to make his debut today. You have players like, Rinku Singh, who's just come in, Baba Indrajit, who's just come in. Shivam Mavi is hardly a very senior player. You have lots of these kids who are going in there and told, kamikaze, go there and just do whatever you have to. So they'll need some of those guys to really put something into the team, because, that's what's missing. But I really feel that they haven't handled their top talent well. And I say this with the utmost respect for Brendan. I think Brendan is fantastic with a team of young players who just have to give it all. Team of young underdogs, Brendan's the man I want captaining him. If it's a team of guys who are more superstars and who need to be handled better, perhaps Brendan is not the perfect guy for that.
Well, at the moment, he does have many of the youngsters. Another quick reminder of the toss as it's happened. Kolkata have won the toss. The men in pink are out there, which they're probably not unhappy about. To set a total, Joss Butler, Devdutt Padikkal, they've made the one change. Karun Nair's come in. Kolkata have made a couple of changes. Anukul Roy comes in. Shivam Mabi comes in. Out go Venkatesh Iyer and Harshit Rana. That's the summary of everything that's leading up to this particular game. Before Pommie and Joy give us their predictions to how many runs Rajasthan might possibly pile up in 20 overs. Joy, you've got a bit of a question for us.
Yep, I have a bit of a question. It's about a stadium that's named after a Bharat Ratna awardee, and the first ever international ton was scored by a player currently with the Rajasthan franchise. Just name the stadium. So it's obviously a player who I can tell you is playing in the playing 11 today. Just tell me which stadium is this.
Too many hints, Joy.
Too many hints, yeah.
Yeah, we were it was just like it was about to turn from outside the off stump, and suddenly you held the length back, half tracker, and now everyone's wanting to hit it out of the ground. Too generous, Joy. So if you're in that generous mood, maybe give us a 20-second or a 15-second preview of what's coming up on Retro Reels.
Lots coming up on Retro Reels. I mean, this is the month that some amazing things happen. Firstly, huge number of wickets for one Praveen Tambe, and there's a film about him now, and it caused the Kolkata collapse and defeat, and then what happened after that defeat is the real story. Obviously, very, very interesting things. Satyajit Ray is a birth anniversary, 101st birth anniversary of one of India's greatest film directors, Satyajit Ray. And what does he have in common with Rohit Sharma? Because there's a little bit out there, and lots of interesting trivia, lots more on Retro Reels.
Wow. Ray, Tambe, Rohit Sharma, hat tricks, comebacks, Kolkata. Wow, it's all happening on Retro Reels. You can't just get it all here from Joy. He's only give you a little bit of a teaser. You want the whole thing? Get on to Cricbuzz Plus, subscribe, get in there. There's lots more to be had. Pommie, you've waited with bated breath. You've had time to think about it. The number.
Oh, 184.
Oh, you've already given. Oh, I thought you were going to, because we gave you so much time, you were going to change it around a million times. Okay, 184. That sounds like the kind of Rajasthan-ish total. Maybe Kolkata would want a little bit less. I think I'm going to bargain for a little bit less and slip in at 176. 176. Joy, where are you going?
I think Kolkata is going to bowl well today. I think it's going to be 161 for me.
Oh, 161. Shreyas would love you for that. And they would fancy themselves to chase that down. They'd love to chase anything down. They have to chase anything down if they are to stay alive. That's what we've told you if you saw the points table. That's all we have on Cricbuzz Live. We're going to be back in 9 overs time in the 10th over for Cricbuzz Combox. And of course, we'll wrap it all up when the innings finishes. For now, from Pommie, Joy, and myself, that's all we have on Cricbuzz Live.